This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Let's welcome in Dane Bradshaw, ESPN SEC Network analyst. Dane, thanks for waking up for us this morning. Did you get a chance, or have you gotten a chance to watch any of the Southern hoops on the SEC Network to this point?
Man, I have not. And every time we do one of those promos in the game, I'd love to piggyback off it and talk about the last episode because I'm excited to see them. And I just hadn't sat down. I'll probably binge watch it here as soon as the season's over and I'm watching less film on teams.
Dane, I would really recommend Part 5, Arkansas Razorbacks, when they first entered the league last night. It was awesome. That was the first time that I had watched it to this point. It came out last night, but it was great. But let's talk about this game tonight. It should be a fun one. You've got two top 15 defenses matching up. You've got some veteran guards going up against some younger guards. You got Anthony Black, Nick Smith Jr. against Santiago Vescovi and Sakai Ziegler. They have struggled at points this season offensively. What are you expecting out of the veteran guards for the Vols tonight?
Well, you're going to see a ton of physicality, of course, on the defensive end. That's where they're at their best. I think what could be bad news for Arkansas is that Tennessee was starting to slip a little bit in February. Some of that was their schedule. Some of it was a little bit of bad luck, and also they were unhealthy. But last game against South Carolina, even though it's an inferior opponent, they got Josiah Jordan-James back. And I don't know that he's an all-conference player, but he's their glue guy. He stretches the floor for them. He can guard multiple spots and gives them another double-digit score. And what was happening for Tennessee is guys like Sakai Ziegler, who's the head of the snake defensively, their floor general. He's at his best when he's giving you kind of maybe 12 and 6. He was having to take on more of a scoring load, and all of a sudden he was taking 10 threes a game, that sort of thing, and he just wasn't as effective. But he was doing it because they were shorthanded with less offensive threats. But they're starting to get healthier. They got a big-time freshman, Julian Phillips, who's been out with a hip flexor. He's kind of their mismatch four-man. He's a game-time decision, so that's one to also keep an eye out for, because in a game like this, as talented as Arkansas is, you hope your best athletes can be available if you're Tennessee. So be on the lookout for that game-time decision of Julian Phillips. But for Anthony Black and Nick Smith, I think this will be as physical of a team that they've played against, and a team that took down Alabama on its home court at Thompson-Boling Arena with that same sort of pedigree.
Dane, is Key back tonight? I know that's another guy that has battled some injuries this season.
He had a right ankle injury that really popped up out of nowhere. Sat out. He looked really bad shoot around, and then sat out the South Carolina game. So far they've put him and Phillips as game time decisions. They've been able to weather the storm probably a little bit more without Key, just because of his inconsistency shooting the ball. But he's another guy that can get hot and be a double-digit scorer. I think they're at their best when they get 5 guys in double digits and no bona fide superstar necessarily, but they're just better as a group.
Arkansas has not been a great road team this year, only has won at Kentucky in conference play. All time, the Razorbacks have won just 4 times at Thompson-Boling Arena. So what has to happen? And Muss has not won. I don't think Muss won there before. But anyway, point is, what has Arkansas got to do tonight to win in a place that's been tough for them historically against a team that is in the top 12 in net ranking, or top 12 of the polls, and number 3 in net ranking?
Yeah, I think one thing they've got to do is get to the free throw line. Arkansas is typically pretty disciplined at turning down some threes and trying to score in the paint. Tennessee can be prone to getting in foul trouble because they are so aggressive on the defensive end. That was one way that Tennessee was not able to beat Texas A&M on the road the other night because they just got dominated at the free throw line, which the Aggies do to a lot of teams. But I do think Arkansas is going to have to, make at least 5 to 6 threes. It can't be a 2 of 20 because Tennessee is the best three-point shooting defense team in the country. And I know that's not the bread and butter for Arkansas, but on the road, senior night, sellout crowd, most likely, you're not going to be able to just only score from 2 and from 3. You got to make a few threes to bail your offense out some a little bit. And I think that's where, Nick Smith as a three-point shooter and just giving them that extra weapon that can go get a bucket on his own, create that mismatch, takes a little pressure off of guys like Black and Council. And I think down low with the Twins, Tennessee, you guys have some depth down low at that spot, and Tennessee similar. They don't have a guy that's just a standout 5-man. They kind of rotate several in and play the hot hand, and so I think that could kind of be the game within the game is whose 5-man can really emerge and kind of get you that double-double that maybe you don't assume night in, night out.
You mentioned watching a lot of film. As you've watched Arkansas and now with Nick Smith back, what are some of the maybe more technical differences you've seen with the Razorbacks with Nick Smith back in the lineup?
Well, I like the pace, a little bit more on the offensive end, the explosiveness. He brings a great energy to that side of the court. Very active. He's hungry to play. I thought, they didn't play their best. Let's see, it was Mississippi State, I believe. I was down there for the call when he first came back, and there, clearly he had some rust on him. There were a couple turnovers where he and Black weren't really on the same page, and that happens. But that was a necessary evil because the ceiling is so much higher for this team. Nick Smith on the court, so you got to put him out there. And so I think they've done the right thing, putting him in the starting lineup sooner or later, getting those minutes up. But this would be a big time road win because Tennessee does not lose at home very often. They had a really poor performance against Kentucky, and Missouri made a miracle kind of half court 3 against them. But again, on senior night, with Tennessee starting to try to put February behind them, where they hadn't been quite as good, but healthier at home, get some shooters back in the lineup. This would be one of the more impressive road wins of the season. Even though Arkansas, I think, toe-to-toe talent-wise can hang in there with Tennessee, but just a raucous atmosphere where there's still a lot at stake from a seeding standpoint.
We're talking with former Tennessee Vol, current SEC, ESPN Network analyst, Dane Bradshaw. Dane, you played with a prolific scorer in Chris Lofton, and I wonder, in watching Nick play, how did he, Chris, and how have you watched Nick balance being aggressive and forcing shots? Because I know sometimes there's a fine line there.
Yeah, I mean, those are some guys that can kind of get off a good shot whenever they want, and it's just trying to figure out, all right, time, score, when do I take it, when do I get others involved. I mean, less talented players like myself, like even if you gave us the green light, we might not be able to get off a good shot at any moment, but a guy like Nick Smith can, and so it's having that discipline and feel for the game. And if he takes an early shot, that doesn't necessarily, and he misses, it doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad look. I think the big thing for him in an Eric Musselman offense is, all right, have you moved the ball around or gotten to that pick and roll action to get the mismatch you want? It's not, there's not a ton of set plays necessarily, or a ton of motion. I mean, they're spacing and try to get that mismatch. And so knowing like, hey, I know you can take that other guard one-on-one. I know you can get one, but let's keep moving it until they maybe switch the big on you, or we get them to open up just a little bit so you can slice through the lane as opposed to just an ISO against their best defender. And that might be the toughest challenge because Tennessee has more than just one guy that can guard the ball. They can lock down. And so if they do switch at times, even if it's their small 5'9" guards, the Kai Ziegler, or a 6'6" kid inside Jordan James, they can usually hold their own guarding the ball. So Nick Smith's not going to maybe have as many mismatches as he's accustomed to.
Dane, Nick is one of the best freshmen in the country, and it's good to see him back playing. So is Brandon Miller. Arkansas saw him up close and personal on Saturday, had a great game, as he did earlier against South Carolina last week. Doesn't get SEC Freshman of the Week. I wonder, you're a guy that has conversations with different analysts, different writers. How are people going to approach Brandon Miller at the end of the season when the awards come out in regards to the situation that we've been discussing the last week?
I mean, I think if you're strictly judging on the court performance, he's the SEC Player of the Year. And, I was maybe a little surprised that he didn't get Player of the Week or Freshman of the Week. There were some other really good performances with Sheboy and Nick Smith, but any other week, Brandon Miller gets one of those awards. And maybe they just felt from a PR standpoint, let's just, before we open ourselves up to, relive reliving this whole controversy. Let's just pass on this week. And so, but when it comes to the end of the year awards, I mean, you look at him, and he's the best player on the best team, and clearly the front runner. And I'd be surprised if he doesn't get the award. And now, if more pieces to this puzzle off the court come out before then, that change things. I mean, that could change it for Nate Oates and everybody, and what happens with Brandon Miller being in the rotation and playing on the court. But for right now, it looks like they're going to go about their business as they have been, and I'd be surprised if he wasn't awarded Player of the Year.
Dane, seems like there is a million possibilities for next week in Nashville. How do you see, or what's your thoughts on next week's SEC tournament? A lot of teams with a lot to play for. Alabama seems to be the only one that's maybe got their destiny locked up for the NCAA tournament at this point.
Yeah, I honestly, I credit a lot of these teams for moving kind of off the bubble conversation prior to the SEC tournament. I thought we were going to have 4, maybe 5 teams that were sitting there in a win and get in scenario, but it looks like Kentucky, A&M, Missouri, some of those teams like that seem to be safely in. Auburn is one to watch for. They've got 2 tough games to close out the year, but they're going to be one saying, all right, we got to at least win one in the SEC tournament. Mississippi State's probably the biggest bubble team. They're one of the last 4 in. Chris Jan's doing a terrific job there. So, yeah, a lot of storylines, and one that Alabama's really separated themselves, but they also are shown to be vulnerable and beatable. So I don't go into this SEC tournament like, hey, this is Alabama's to lose just because their record's been so good in conference play. So, it is a wide open SEC tournament with a ton at stake. In a team like Tennessee or your all's team, Arkansas, man, you're just trying to improve that seeding as best you can. I know for Tennessee, trying not to slip into that 4 or 5 type seed in the NCAA tournament, which usually spells upset city in those 5-12 type matchups. So, and the good news for the SEC is there's so many quality win opportunities in the SEC tournament. You really just try to stay out of that Wednesday matchup, which it looks like all the most relevant teams are going to stay out of, and move on to Thursday, and we'll see.
What's been going on from a national perspective with A&M? I know they had some tough non-conference losses, but it seems like it's only been the last couple of weeks. They've broken into the polls. Their net rankings moved up. No longer are they on the bubble or next 4 in, last 4 out kind of conversation. All they've done, Dane, and listen, I hate defending Aggies, but all they've done is pretty much been the number 2 team in this league from the get-go in conference play. Why did it take everything so long to catch up with A&M and what they've done in SEC play?
Yeah, I mean, from the eye test, from December, I guess, 28th or so, after they got back from Christmas, for 2 months they've been terrific, phenomenal. And there's no question they've looked every bit of a top 25 team, an NCAA tournament team. Their body of work, though, you couldn't escape or hide from in November, December. They were the biggest disappointment in the SEC and non-conference, and there's really no question about it. Even with during this, Kentucky started to lose some in conference, but just strictly non-conference, A&M had the most expectations that weren't met. They lost to teams like Murray State, Colorado, Wofford. But now they came back. They got their identity. They know exactly who they're playing. Their starting 5. They've had the same starting 5 the entire SEC slate. They've had the same rotations and subs. Guys embrace their roles. And when you look across the SEC with a lot of teams Arkansas, is Nick Smith in or out? Tennessee's had guys in or out. Kentucky in or out. And, Texas A&M's just been able to be really consistent the past 2 months. And you all recall last year they got hot late, but it was a little bit too little, too late. They got snubbed at the end, whereas this year they got things turned around much quicker, much faster, to where there's no doubt that they're going to be in the NCAA tournament. And hats off to Buzz Williams for keeping that locker room after a really disappointing start to the year.
Dane, we'll leave it there. Dane Bradshaw, SEC Network, ESPN analyst, former Tennessee Volunteer, kind enough to wake up with us this morning and give us a little preview of what's to come tonight. Dane, appreciate it, man. Best of luck tonight. It's a late one there in Knoxville at 9 o'clock, so make sure you get a nap in before tonight.
All right. You guys have a good one.
BetOnline remains your number one source for all your sports betting this season. Everything from the NFL and bowl season to esports. You'll find the latest odds, team matchup info, player news, and game trends at BetOnline. BetOnline features live betting, free contests, and live scores for almost any sport or game imaginable. We're the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite leagues and events. Head to betonline.ag to join and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Make sure to use the promo code BELIEVE to receive your rewards. That's BLEAV. Bet online, where the game starts.